Hello, Professor. This is Ethan Eggerding here, and for my video presentation, I decided to do the subject of Django Reinhardt, the European jazz guitar player. So, Django Reinhardt was born in 1910 in Belgium. He was a part of the Romani culture and heritage, so he actually grew up in a gypsy caravan. In that gypsy caravan, he actually picked up music quite quickly. Both his parents were entertainers, and a lot of other people in the Romani culture made their money as entertainers or making money off of the rest of the populace. And so Django learned how to play guitar at a very young age. He played on what we called a banjo guitar, and then later on switched to what we more modernly think of as a guitar. Um, and so he actually started playing shows and making money like when he was like 9, 12 years old. He was busking in the streets. He was not unfamiliar with playing music and being on stage. Um, and this kind of trend continued, him playing this kind of traditional Romani, folk music and that sort of thing, up until about the age of when he was 18 years old, when he actually had a horrific accident. There was a fire in the wagon that he was sleeping in the caravan, and he actually badly burned the entire left side of his body. He actually had to go into rehab for about 18 months. Doctors recommended amputating his left leg. They recommended amputating his left hand, which was critical for him playing guitar. Django refused all this and eventually went through extensive rehabilitation for 18 months. Eventually learned how to walk again without the aid of a cane, and also retaught himself how to play guitar without using these two fingers, which has become a distinctive style of his that has actually permeated even into modern day music. A lot of people talk about the Django style of playing. Um, so after this, Django kind of gets back on his feet, gets back into music, and starts becoming very influenced by American jazz artists, such as one of his favorites is Duke Ellington. Another one is Louis Armstrong, some of the jazz greats. So he starts getting into jazz. He ends up meeting this guy named Stephen Grappelli, who is a violin player. And he approaches Grappelli, and they eventually form what's known as the Hot Club Quintet, which was the very first ever all-string jazz band. So the Hot Club in France, they, experimented with all-string jazz. Like I said, that was a first right there, that happening. Also, what had happened too is Django became the first solo guitar player. Before this, guitar was just largely seen as a rhythm instrument, just recording and keeping time. And Django kind of brought it to the forefront. He kind of showed that it does have, a great range and just a lot of jazz possibilities in the guitar. So after him and Grappelli have been doing their thing for a while in the Hot Club, World War II breaks out. The band gets suspended for a while, obviously, with all the tensions going on. They also got separated, so Grappelli got stuck in London, and Django got stuck in Paris. So that just kind of was not happening for a little while. They eventually did get back together in I think 1946 after the war. They got back together and started touring again. And around this time, too, Django got his first big American break. We actually got invited to do an American tour with Duke Ellington and his orchestra. Django jumped on the opportunity. He toured around America with them and was really well received, but Django himself actually saw it as kind of a failure. He didn't really feel like he fit really well into American culture. He was already basically illiterate in French, and he didn't know any English at all, so he really had a hard time communicating as well, too. But eventually, goes back over to France. Kind of still does music lightly for a while. Actually, falls out of the music scene for a little while. Does painting, oddly enough, and then kind of gets back into it for several years before he eventually dies in 1953. But Django had a lot of good contributions to the world of jazz and the world of music. He developed the very first ever all-string jazz group. Which honestly, jazz and strings goes together miraculously. Like, the way they put that stuff together is amazing to me. I just love it. He was the first great jazz musician to come out of Europe, too. And this is kind of a unique thing as well, too, because he was also the very first European jazz musician to actually influence American jazz musicians. This is the first time that influence has gone in that direction across the pond. He also was one of the first guitar players to dabble in amplification. He did a little bit with that, but usually just to kind of expand and clean up his sound, and so he could have a guitar compete next to, more naturally loud instruments. He also created an entire genre of music. Gypsy jazz would not exist if it wasn't for Django Reinhardt. And that's still a style of music that is, pretty popular today. There's still like Django Festival that happens I think there's three actual big festivals around the world that are directly dedicated to Django Reinhardt, which is pretty wild to me too. Um, but yeah, that kind of is Django Reinhardt in a nutshell. And sorry, I went a little bit over time. I just wanted to be, clear, concise, and make sure I got, biography as well as accomplishments all wrapped up here in a nice bundle for you. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the presentation. Take care, stay safe, wash your hands.